Meanwhile, the House passing a sweeping police reform bill yesterday aimed at curbing excessive force. It comes just one day after Democrats blocked debate on the GOP's version in the Senate. The vote nearly down party lines, with 3 Republicans crossing over.
We have the opportunity and the obligation to ensure that his death and the deaths of so many others are not in vain. When we pass this bill, the Senate will have a choice: to honor George Floyd's life or to do nothing.
Joining me right now is former Connecticut Senator, vice presidential candidate, and United Against Nuclear Iran chairman, Kasowitz Benson Torres Senior Counsel, Joe Lieberman. And Joe, it's great to see you this morning. Thanks very much for joining us. Why is it that the two sides cannot get together on police reform? We've got 2 very similar packages, and yet it all is along party lines.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is the problem that makes the American people angry at their government in Washington, lose confidence in their government. The public is really agitated about what they saw in the death of George Floyd, the police officer just sitting almost blandly, unemotionally on the neck of a fellow human being until he died. And they want something done about it, but they don't want their police strung up either, because we're a rule of law society. We depend on our police. So absolutely right. You've got 2 bills, one Senator Scott's in the Senate and now the House Democratic bill. They cover the same subjects. They go at it a little differently. Oh, come on, let's get together and compromise, which is the way the big things have always happened in Congress, and get something done. And that's the challenge now for Congress, both parties. I hope some of the leaders decide to break out of it. Speaker Pelosi and Senator McConnell have worked together on some things. Maybe they ought to just put their heads together and figure out how to get something done now. It's important for our country.
One of the things that the Democrats want, they want the elimination of qualified immunity. And, of course, this is a protection that police have in the case of lawsuits. And A.G. Barr said to me, look, if there's no qualified immunity, people will not even begin to think about becoming a police officer. But, Senator, you would think that there is agreement about all of this stuff going on across the country where, you know, looters have taken advantage of peaceful protesters, or, you know, taking over parts of cities. They tried to do it in Providence, but they certainly did do it in Seattle in terms of that chop zone. What's your take on that? Shouldn't we all agree that we don't want, you know, looters to come and destroy our infrastructure, knocking down statues?
Yeah, I mean, we understand, I think most Americans understand and share the anger at what we watched, which is the death and murder, really, of George Floyd in Minneapolis. But on the other hand, we live in a rule of law society. We can't have mobs controlling action. There's no justification, no matter how angry you are, for looting, for turning on the police, et cetera, et cetera. So it's got to be calm. And I think one of the ways to calm it down is for the Republicans and Democrats in Congress to join with the president and get a police reform bill passed. And it's never going to be perfect. Nothing ever is. But as we always said in Capitol Hill, the perfect shouldn't be allowed to be the enemy of the good. Let's get something good done now on this.
But Senator, they're not going to do that because the Democrats want Donald Trump out. Look, this was from day one. We've got the race for the White House, closer than ever. President Trump and Joe Biden both taking aim at one another from dueling campaign events. Listen to this. Got to get your reaction.
Donald Trump needs to stop caring about how he looks and start caring about what America's happening to the rest of America.
It's so crazy what's happening. Here's a guy doesn't talk. Nobody hears him. Whenever he does talk, he can't put 2 sentences together. I don't want to be nice or unnice, okay? But, I mean, the man can't speak.
Now we have over 120 million dead from COVID.
That's a serious error. That's not a permissible type of error. We're talking about the presidency of the United States, and it's just not acceptable.
Meanwhile, A new Fox News poll shows that Biden is in the lead in several key states like Florida. Senator, how do you see the race?
Well, there's no question, based on the polling, that if the election were held today, Joe Biden would be elected president. But there are more than 4 months to go. A big factor is somewhat in the control of the president, but not really, which is can we control the spread of coronavirus? And if those numbers begin to go down again, the economy will go up. People will feel good. Right now, when you ask the American people, is the country headed in the right direction or the wrong direction wins by an enormous amount. And that's not good news for the incumbent. But the president really, those clips you just showed, Maria, they warn us, urge us to be prepared for one of the dirtiest and most personal campaigns in American history. And I don't think it's what the American people want. I think they want to hear both candidates stop attacking each other and talk about their plans for the next 4 years if they get elected. And but right now, the president's got work to do. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, Joe. Now, China is going to be one of the issues this election. The Trump administration now has named 20 Chinese companies, including technology giant Huawei, that it says are backed by the Chinese military. During my exclusive interview with Attorney General Barr, he told me that the U.S. must rally behind telecom companies like Ericsson and Nokia, because those are the two strongest companies to pose a challenge to Huawei. Listen to this.
Would the U.S. consider acquiring Ericsson and Nokia to send a message to the world that if you use Ericsson and Nokia, you've got the backing of the United States government as an alternative to Huawei?
So, I mean, I gave a speech a while back saying that it was that the two companies best positioned to compete with Huawei are Ericsson and Nokia. But unlike Huawei, Huawei has the backing of the Chinese government and all the Chinese government money. Ultimately, the West has to rally around these companies, whether that means private ownership or state involvement.
So you would be okay taking a stake, even if it's a minority stake, in these companies to offset the threat of Huawei, then?
That's not a decision for the Justice Department. I do think that the West has to pick a horse or horses.
Your reaction, Senator.
Yeah, I think there's some really good thinking there. First, let me say it's hard to believe, because we have such great high-tech and telecom companies, that there's not now a single American company to compete with the Chinese telecom companies. We've got to go to Ericsson and Nokia, but so be it. That's the way it is. And I think what the Attorney General Barr said is really worth all of us thinking about. Part of why the Chinese telecom companies have done so well is that they have been a part of big Chinese plans. In other words, the government has backed them, and it gives them an advantage. And that no longer seems to happen in the U.S. So we've got to go back in a very practical, I think, non-ideological way and create, again, what we used to call public-private partnerships. Obviously, the other thing that can happen is that the Chinese government companies can do some things to reassure us that they're not going to use 5G sales in America to compromise our security. But so far, they haven't done any of that.
All right, Senator Joe Lieberman, it is good to see you this morning. We will keep watching, of course. We'll see you soon, sir. Thank you. To you. Thank you.